Have you had a great morning or what? What a fabulous lineup of speakers, insightful and inspirational. Thank you particularly, especially Pastor McPherson. What a powerful lesson he shared with us this morning. I know so many of us have talked about the importance of telling stories. We know the power of telling stories and the impact that can have on the debate. It literally changes the debate. Think how much more impact we can have in this world if we overcome our blind spots, if we honor what we have in common, if we want policies that make sense, that work for people, even people not like you. Go there. Meet your neighbor. So many important lessons that Pastor McPherson shared with us this morning. Overwhelming majorities still believe that America is the land of opportunity. We know that. The American people know that. For those of us in the policy world, it's important that we study the polls. As we have heard and as we'll hear this afternoon from Scott Rasmussen, it's important that we educate our fellow citizens on the real agenda, as we heard this morning, behind the latest attempts to equalize us. And it's important that we continue to move power out of Washington to the people. So thank you to all of you state think tank representatives in the room for your leadership in that fight. And thank you to the lawyers in the room, yes, the lawyers in the room, who are protecting our freedoms. And thank you to all of the activists who've joined us this year. You remind our elected officials daily that we, the people, are in charge. We, the people, are free. And thanks to great political leaders like Arizona's Governor Doug Ducey, who is a real champion of the people. Before he entered politics, Governor Ducey was a successful business executive and an entrepreneur. In fact, he was the president of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization here in Arizona. He and his business partner grew one of my favorites, Cold Stone Creamery, to 1,400 stores in 10 countries before they sold the business in 2007. He's been active in healthcare, education, and charitable causes that directly impact the lives of Arizonans. He put his business and investment skills to work as treasurer for the state of Arizona in 2011, and in 2014, he was elected to put those skills to work as governor. After inheriting a $1 billion budget deficit, he wasted no time in balancing the budget his first year in office without raising taxes. That's pretty impressive. And the state budget that was passed into law late last night or the night before expands the rainy day fund to $1 billion. So that was a phenomenal turnaround in a very short amount of time. I'm hoping to ask him what advice he can give us in Washington for such a turnaround as that. He's cut regulations and simplified taxes every year to stimulate job creation and economic growth. And now Arizona ranks as the top three, within the top three for economic momentum, and it's the fourth fastest growing state in the country. Governor Ducey has championed laws that make it easier for the hundreds of thousands of people who move to Arizona each year. It's easier for them to get a job now. And when it comes to Arizona's children, the governor has expanded education savings accounts, invested more resources in the classroom, and prioritized providing safe, permanent homes for Arizona's foster children. Today, Arizona's budget is balanced. Business is thriving, and Arizona is on the rise. In his second term, Governor Ducey has said he remains committed to making Arizona a land of opportunity for all. And he's pledged to work every day to make that vision a reality. Let's welcome a real champion for the people of Arizona, Governor Ducey.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we're just going to have a chat here. We've got a lot of issues we wanted the governor to cover and share some of his experience.
Let me just start by saying good afternoon and welcome to summer in Arizona. I hope you're enjoying yourself.
It's been a fabulous couple of days here. We understand that we brought a little bit of the cool weather with us, so thank you for putting on a great show here in the state. You've had incredible success in the business world, and you're having great success with your agenda here in the state. How did this business experience inform the work that you've been doing in the state?
Well, first I just want to say thanks to Heritage Foundation and the Resource Bank. I'm a big fan of what the people in the audience do. I want you to know that much of my staff came from these types of organizations, and they've been very helpful on the public policy side of things. And I think a lot of your scorecards and measurements are helpful. And the publications that you put out as well on good policy ideas. But I like to say, you know, as governor, you get to talk to all the interns, all the young people, and it's really been an eye-opener to me how many high-quality, highly intelligent, hardworking young people are involved in these internships and public policy. So I always say, if you ever want to grow up and be governor or a congressman or a senator, go out and do something else with your life besides politics. Build a business, turn a school around, join the military, because everything I am doing in the governor's office, I learned before I got there. I've met a lot of nice new people that are of the highest quality. I've learned an incredible amount of new acronyms. But the ability to be a chief executive, to set the vision, chart the course, pick the people. I learned that before I got to the governor's office, and I think we did inherit a $1 billion deficit. That's when we came into office. Victor Riches from the Goldwater Institute is here. He was my original deputy chief. And I used to like to say, Bridgett touched on that my company was Cold Stone Creamery. You get a lot of undeserved popularity when you're selling ice cream. But I can guarantee you that it all goes away the day you balance that first budget. But it is possible. And to those of you that are organization leaders in the room, it would take you, if I passed out that first year's budget to you right now with a crayon at every table, it would take you 15 minutes to balance this budget. What you had to deal with was the political unpopularity in making those difficult decisions. And we actually, at the end of our first year, had a government that was smaller than the government we inherited.
That's awesome.
So it can be done, and the advice I give to other new governors, you get to go to something called New Governor's School, that really exists. And governors are remarkably collegial. And most governors they don't want Barack Obama or Donald Trump running their state any more than I do. So there's a lot of problem solving there, but when you have to make those tough decisions, you need to make them in year one. And that's what we did. And today, it's almost unbelievable to me. I'm going to sign this year's budget this afternoon. We went from $1 billion deficit to the largest surplus in this state over the past decade, and we will have $1 billion balance in the rainy day fund. That's while simplifying and lowering taxes every single year.
Wow, that's incredible. That's great. So you've had a number of incredible policy successes, and I know one of them that you're particularly proud of deals with occupational licensing. And as you're getting so many new Arizonans into the state, this is a really key reform to getting these people right to work. Can you explain what are the stories you've heard behind this? How's this impacting people's lives? Tell people a little bit more about occupational licensing.
Sure. So we're proud of, I think in the game of ice cream, people vote with their dollars. In the game of states, people vote with their feet. Today, you're sitting right now in the fastest growing county in the country, 3 years running. Maricopa County is one of the larger counties in the nation too, so it's not on a small base. It's the metropolitan area in Greater Phoenix is 4.8 million. That's larger than 26 other American states. So many of our problems right now are very good ones. We have more jobs available than we have people to fill them. And now in this new Trump-Pence administration, this isn't unusual. It was unusual 4 years ago. The economy was sluggish, and as we got it to start growing, we wanted to just put people to work. And we saw that we had these unreasonable barriers that were there that would have people move to the state, oftentimes a trailing spouse in a military family, and whether they were worked in a hair salon or did nails or were a yoga instructor, we had all kinds of obstacles that would not allow them to go to work. So it was actually my policy team came up with this idea called universal recognition of occupational licenses. Basically, if you've been recognized in another state, you've done whatever their education threshold is, whatever it took to get the license there, you don't lose those skills just because you pack up a U-Haul truck and move to the state of Arizona. So we're going to recognize those skills, and we do have these great success stories from people that were, whether they were nurses in another state or involved in, I mean, we were somewhat surprised at the amount of licenses that a state like Arizona, the land of Barry Goldwater, had put in front of citizens. So trying to deconstruct the bullies that are part of the boards and commissions, we were able to, through executive order, fire all the government paid lobbyists that populate these boards. Because we actually, you know, the boards and commissions are part of the executive branch, yet they would have opponents of ours paid for by the government on the board. So slowly but surely I think we've done some unique things, Bridgett, and any of you that have ever been around legislators, they're always talking about the laws that they want to pass. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in the tradition of Barry Goldwater, he writes in Conscience of a Conservative that he didn't run for office to pass laws, he ran for office to repeal laws. So we challenge the legislature every year to repeal laws, to get laws off the books, but there were things we could do from the executive branch, and we didn't need the consent of the legislature, and that was how many regulations and rules do we have in the state of Arizona. And even with the power of the governor's office, it took us about 18 months to cull all those regulations together. We came to 11,000 regulations in the state of Arizona, and in just 2 short years of focus, we've been able to eliminate, to wipe off the books 1,098 regulations, which is the equivalent of a $78 million tax cut without affecting the general fund $1.
That is fabulous.
But I think very rarely do elected officials look to what they can eliminate, what they can clear out of the way. I always get a kick out of it during the election cycle when I see these politicians running for office that want to talk about all the jobs that they're going to create. Politicians don't create jobs. Entrepreneurs and risk takers create jobs. But what governors can do is they can create the environment in which jobs can be created. And to me, that's low taxes, light regulation, low liability and litigation. You know, those are the types of things you can directly address in public policy.
That's fabulous. You must have a long line of businesses that are interested in moving to Arizona with this. That's an exciting development. Now, you can't have solved all of the problems in the state of Arizona. What do you see, looking out on the horizon, what are the biggest challenges facing your state, and what do you see? We've got a whole room of policy leaders. What are the challenges you see facing the states that maybe we should be turning our attention to?
Well, I want to address the predicate of the question first. We do have a lot of businesses that want to move here. I was actually able to say in my second State of the State, I was able to say I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my partner in growing Arizona's economy, and that's been California Governor Jerry Brown. This guy was phenomenal. I've thanked him several times, and I've challenged Gavin Newsom to continue in that tradition. But they're doing things that are almost exactly the opposite in terms of raising taxes, increasing regulation, pushing people and producers out. I think some things that we can do at the state level. One is this idea of federalism or states' rights. I do think there is still way too big of a focus on Washington, D.C. and our federal government. And even at some of the symposiums that the nice people here will invite me to in Washington, I'll be on stage with a bunch of congressmen or senators, and they are all, even the committed conservatives, looking for solutions in Washington, D.C., rather than breaking up the cartel and pushing the dollars and the programs back to D.C. There's a reason why Drain the Swamp was so effective during the campaign, is because people know that Washington, D.C. is broken. They know it's not working. And to push this back to the states, like I said, I learned this in new governor school when I was a new governor. I had to go up and Google John Hickenlooper because I couldn't tell what party he was from. He was an entrepreneur, and this was 4 years ago. He had owned businesses in Colorado, but it hit me. This is a Democratic governor that does not want Barack Obama leading Colorado. So I think you'd find a lot of purchase there and a lot of agency. The other thing, the first law that I passed as governor was the American Civics Act. Okay, to become a new American in this country, as you're naturalized, you have to take a test. It has 100 questions on it. You can Google it after I'm done here. Everybody in this room, I imagine, would get a 96 or 97%. And you don't even remember where you learned the answers to these questions. They were part of your household, your childhood, your scoutmaster, your coaches. All of this has, to a large degree, been removed from teaching and certainly from testing in our public schools. So I think what we can do is make certain that our citizens, our young people, are getting a foundational base in civics and our American history and our founding documents. I think that cannot be removed from our educational process. In Arizona, we lead in school choice. We have 500 charter schools in the state of Arizona, over 200,000 kids that are educated inside those schools. We want to make sure not only in the public charters, but the public districts, that everyone has a civic knowledge so that we can debate from those foundational documents.
That's an incredible step forward. I think so many of us are focused on the school choice aspect of it, but really overlook that content piece. So thank you for leading the way on that as well. You've got a very entrepreneurial think tank right here in Arizona, and I know Victor has been a great partner in the administration. We've got lots of state-based think tank, lots of think tank representatives even from Washington. What have you seen is the best way for a think tank to work alongside a reform-minded governor? And if you've got advice, I know those who don't have a reform-minded governor would appreciate your advice as well, but what's the role of a think tank in helping to change the policy?
Well, the first thing I'd say to all the think tank leaders out there is to really embrace your role in terms of the inside your shop. You have solutions for the governor and for the government. And it's hard for me to exactly address because the first political event that I ever attended in Arizona was at the Goldwater Institute as the CEO of Cold Stone before I ever thought that I would run for governor. And I was a subscriber to National Review. So this is really where my ideological bias was to begin with. And I've always seen the Goldwater Institute as an extension, of the administration. Many of the, Christina Corriere here is with me today. She's my top policy advisor. She comes out of the Goldwater Institute as well. So I don't think there's really any substitute for candidate recruitment in this business. Once people are in office, the training and education that they receive, whether you're a governor, a treasurer, or a legislature, there is a learning curve, and I think the think tanks can have a large role in that, and then to advocate for, to get, that we can all get back to the business of ideas. and the competition of ideas. A lot of times when I'm talking to young people, I'll always close with that idea of that they should go out and do something else in their life besides politics. But I like to ask, how many of you know your party affiliation? And these are high school kids. These are kids that don't yet have the right to vote, and every hand will go up. And I'll say, how many Democrats, how many independents, how many Republicans? And I really encourage them not to put their faith in parties, but to get the best education they can, put their faith in ideas, to make sure they're committed to some enduring values and principles, and then develop those leadership skills and real-world examples, and they can make the biggest difference in public policy or an elected office in those ways.
I think that's fabulous. I know Jack Fowler of National Review, sitting across the room, is writing down quickly your endorsement of National Review, so appreciate you.
Where is Jack?
Jack is over.
They have ducked out. Tell him I said hello.
Yes, we will. So what has been your inspiration? You were a strong business leader. You obviously have read deeply. You're a Goldwater fan, but what was your inspiration? What inspires you today to keep at this?
Well, I was inspired by a number of things. One, I was really just focused on building my business and raising my family. And I was somewhat naive when I entered public life, Bridgett. The only thing that grew faster than Cold Stone Creamery was the state of Arizona. And I had never even been down to the state capitol. And in the downturn in 2009, our state became insolvent. We were literally $730 million on a servicing credit line from Bank of America to pay teachers, fill potholes, or provide any other essential state services. And I had sold my company in 2007. I was investing in a couple other enterprises, and the treasurer's office opened up, and I thought someone that was an outsider and a newcomer with a business background could make a difference. I didn't realize really what it meant to put your name on a ballot and what you would go through. But I was able to overcome those things. My wife, Angela, will be married 29 years this October. She was supportive. My boys saw it as a sporting event, so victory solved all those problems. And one thing we're really fortunate with in Arizona is that Phoenix is our capital city. I live about 20 minutes from the Capitol. So this has been a great experience. Being a governor is a great job. Like I said, you are the chief executive. You get to set the agenda, chart the course, and pick the people. And the confidence that I learned as treasurer, not only being helpful and trying to get our state back on solid footing, but defeating something called Prop 204, which was a $1 billion sales tax increase that was going to the ballot. I was the elected leader that stood up against that. Had that passed, that would have made Arizona the second highest sales tax state in the nation. And we're not a state like Florida, Texas, or Nevada that has zero income taxes. So I made the case that this is something that would kill our economy long term. When I got involved, it was about 11 weeks before Election Day in 2012. It was polling, I think, 70-30 or 65-35. We were able to flip that around, and that gave me a lot of confidence. We had the first open seat for governor 2 years later. I thought, why not? I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. And that's why I was so focused on not only balancing that budget, but getting that balance in the rainy day fund so that we're structurally sound. I think Arizona, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, not part of the political class. My dad was a cop. I came out here, my mom moved out west in 1982. I came out here, went to school, got my education, met my wife, built my business. I think Arizona is a very special place. It's an oasis of freedom and opportunity in the United States. And I was motivated that I wanted to see my boys and anyone else that came after me. And also I believe in the healthy competition, not only of ideas, but between states. And I think that Arizona, when I got into office, Rick Perry and Greg Abbott, they seem to have all the bragging rights. And Rick Scott did some incredible things in Florida. And now I will tell you, when we go to some of these national settings, I'm very proud to be sitting next to some of these other really what were excellent models. And we've taken some good ideas and just reapplied them in Arizona, and then we've innovated on our own ideas. And I'm really challenging my senior staff on, what policy entrepreneurship can we do going forward? And I think we also should be challenging this administration, since it is an administration that is open and welcome to our ideas. And I believe President Trump and Vice President Pence are very open-minded to that. But what I see inside the agencies is still a lot of bureaucracy. I still see, why do I have to come back to Washington, D.C. and ask, Mother, may I? I thought what won the election is that we're going to push these dollars back to the states, and I think we've got a window of opportunity, regardless of what's happening on the national political stage, to pilot those programs and set those ideas in place. And once we get those dollars back to the states, I think it's going to be much more difficult to get them back to Washington, D.C.
I think that's such an inspiring message. One of your competitors in the competitive federalism game, Brooke Rollins is with us here, who headed up Texas Public Policy Foundation and was an advisor to Governor Perry and is now in the White House trying to do exactly what you're describing. We're going to hear from Brooke in a minute. We've got a number of people with us today. One's considering a run for governor in a neighbor state, and one is considering a run for Congress. These are not people out and about yet. And we have a state treasurer, Allison Ball, the chairman of the state financial officers, with us. What advice would you give people who are considering? Some of you may not even yet have considered running for office, but what advice would you give people who are seriously considering stepping into these very big shoes that you have? You've been bold, and to get them to consider stepping up and doing something just as you have done.
Well, I would encourage people to do this. I mean, especially people that are having lunch in a room like this. I'm going to imagine your vetting process is pretty good as to what people's core beliefs are. In terms of being a governor, it is a fantastic job. You are in charge. You're not in control, but you are in charge, and of course in our constitutional republic, small r system. So I've loved that chief executive role, but we need good people across the board. And what you can learn as treasurer is something that you can apply as governor while you get the pension program under control, while you help be an advocate for lower taxes and lighter spending and things like that. Of course, we need good people in Congress. I would hope that the people that are going to Congress would want to be productive in bringing these ideas back to the states. What I say to the good people that I know in Congress, and there are some, is why don't you focus on foreign policy and defense and leave the rest to us. Leave the rest to the governors. And I think we would not only have more and better people involved in state and local and municipal government, we'd have a better government. I think a lot of people have thrown their hands up and they've quit watching the news because they are sick of it. They are sick of Washington, D.C., and they see, regardless of who's in charge at the top, what's happening in the legislative process, in the budgeting process, in the spending process. Very little seems to change. That would be different at the state level, and we don't get to print money, and we're very limited in our borrowing, and in Arizona we're paying down our debt.
I think that's a wonderful point. It's a great point to end on. I think for those of us back in Washington, to the extent that we can return more power to the state, I think we would likely see more dynamic, entrepreneurial leaders like Governor Ducey stepping up and saying, yes, they do want to play a role if the states have more say, if the people have more say. So I want to just thank you for joining us today. I know you've got a busy schedule. You've just completed the legislative session. So won't you all join me in thanking Governor Ducey for being with us.
Bridgett.
Thank you. This was
Thanks
awesome.
so
We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, anything I need to be helpful. I'm a big fan of what you guys do.
Oh, awesome. We love to hear that.
Yeah, you got it.
Take care. We'll stay in touch. Okay. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be in a state that's on the move and to be joined by the leader and the team around him who've really made that happen. So we want to thank the governor for his leadership, and now it's my pleasure to call up a remarkable think tank leader and a great partner to the governor in making that reform possible, Victor Riches. And Victor has an extensive background in state government and state policy. He actually started his career at the Capitol and at the Arizona legislature, where he spearheaded the state's first school choice legislation, as well as the largest tax cut in Arizona's state history. I'm told that you were actually chief of staff, the only person in the state's history, chief of staff in both the House of Representatives and the Arizona State Senate. So he's seen it from all angles. He moved from the legislature into the think tank world, and he led the Goldwater Institute team that developed and passed many of their incredible free market, liberty-based policies into law, and that have spread across the country, including the Institute's Right to Try initiative, which has now been passed into law in more than 40 states. He joined the Ducey administration for its critical first 2 years as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Budget, as the governor mentioned, and he was responsible for developing and passing the governor's major policy objectives and that critical first state budget that was the first budget that balanced in more than a decade. In fact, when Victor left the state government to join Goldwater, the governor said, I love this quote, "Without Victor's wealth of experience with the budget, the legislature, and the state government operations, we would not have been able to achieve so much success in the first 2 years." He's been absolutely critical as a member of our team. Victor, congratulations for the work that you've done and the difference that you've made in so many lives here in Arizona. Victor's going to join us for just a quick welcome. Awesome.
Thank you very much.
That.
Well, thank you very much, Bridgett. I really appreciate that. And I wasn't going to really tell any stories about the governor, but since we brought up the budget, I just thought I would say that when I first came up to his administration, I think he'd literally been governor for probably about a week. We'd all just been up there for a short amount of time. And I remember bringing him the first budget proposal where we actually had to cut more than $1 billion. And I have to admit, there is a part of me, just knowing how past governors had acted, that I actually thought I might be the shortest tenured deputy chief of staff in the history of mankind. But to the governor's eternal credit, he realized the importance of balancing the state budget, and he realized how critical that was to the success of Arizona. And I think a lot of positive things have come from that. And I'm going to add a little bit to what the governor said about occupational licenses, because this is work that we're very deeply involved with at Goldwater, and we've done passed a lot of great bills in Arizona. And not only do these things save people thousands of hours of time when you're talking about occupational licenses and thousands of dollars, they're also very important to our military families who oftentimes move from state to state to state, serving this great country. And yet, despite the obvious benefits of these types of ideas, it never ceases to amaze me how many bureaucrats and agency heads still oppose these measures. And I mention this because, and I'm sure everyone in this room will be very surprised to hear this, but their opposition completely disappears if you simply agree to give them a fee for the privilege of working and helping the economy. And I think that more than anything else really does demonstrate the real problems with government today, and that is that all of these licenses and fees and permits really have nothing to do with public health and safety and have everything to do with nickel and diming each and every one of us from cradle to grave. And so I'm very, very happy to be here today, and I'm very happy to have the privilege of standing up here because I travel all around the country for my job, and I meet with a lot of policymakers. But in this room today, we really do have the very best of the best, and people who understand the importance of getting the government off our backs, getting the government out of our wallets, and most importantly, They know how to move this country forward. So thank you all very much for being here, and I want to welcome you all to the great state of Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Victor. Let's see. Now we have a real special friend who's joined us. She's a great friend to those of us in the room, and she's, I think, a dear friend to those folks from the State Policy Network community, particularly that CEO network, Brooke Rollins. Brooke is assistant to the president for strategic initiatives at the White House. Many of us first met Brooke when she was named CEO of the Texas Public Policy Foundation way back in 2002. I can't believe it's been that long. She was already familiar to some of us as the policy director for then Governor Rick Perry. Sharp and sharp-witted, she was a strong and committed advocate for free market limited government principles in the governor's office. And she credits her small town Texas upbringing, and her small business owner mom for her commitment to these principles. Brooke, when she took over Texas Public Policy Foundation, it was a 3-person operation in San Antonio, Texas. That's not the state capital. So Brooke grew that operation, and they have become a force to be reckoned with, not just in Texas, but across the country. They can now boast a staff of more than 100 employees and an impressive headquarters just 2 blocks from the state capitol, and a Washington operation as well. As CEO of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Brooke was really able to put her entrepreneurial skills to work building policy teams that not only impacted the future of her own state, but also shaped the debates around important policy initiatives for the rest of the country, like criminal justice reform, tax and healthcare policy, and federalism. So it's really no surprise that President Trump tapped her for a big role in his Office of American Innovation. She's a great advocate for competitive federalism, competitive markets, and individual freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our friend Brooke Rollins. Awesome, it's so great to have you here.
Wow, well, it is so nice to be here. Bridgett Wagner was the first person, maybe not the very first, but one of the first people, I've told her this story, that I met when I first joined the movement now 16 or 17 years ago. I think we'd flown to Washington. I think we were sitting on a bus, and I sat next to her. And it literally seems like yesterday, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I had gotten myself into. Someone called and said, hey, we hear, Rick Perry was involved in all this too, but they said, hey, we hear that, you may be looking for the next step and you're leaving the governor's office and you should think about this little think tank called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And I said, I don't even know what a think tank is. And they said, oh, well, it's this great opportunity to change the world. And I said, ooh, that sounds fun. I'm in on that. Accepted the job without really asking about whether there was money in the bank to make payroll, whether we had paid rent for the last year, whether our credit cards had been paid. I'm sure some of you who've been in the movement for a long time can appreciate this. It was a very different looking movement back then. And fortunately, thanks be to God, I did not ask those questions because I probably would have at least thought about it a little bit longer before I jumped in head first and said, yes, I am all in. If you had told me back then whether I would ever have dreamed that I would be here with all of my amazing friends at the Heritage Foundation, Bridgett, Jim, Mrs. James, everybody so extraordinary. But even more importantly than that, that so many of you in the audience whom I have known and worked with for almost 2 decades, that we would have this extraordinary opportunity we have right now to truly save the soul of this country. I'm not sure I could have believed it. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much. It really is an honor to be here. I want to talk today about a couple of things, but mainly under one theme, and that is prosperity. Not just prosperity for some, but prosperity for all. Opportunity, dignity, and freedom, these are the pillars of American exceptionalism. And they date to the founding of our great nation. Our Constitution set out these conditions for prosperity, but our founding fathers truly left the rest to us. Over the years, the triumph of the American spirit has brought about groundbreaking innovation, and just as importantly, a united nation forged in the fire of patriotism. The rising tides of freedom and free enterprise and individual liberty have lifted all boats, from those with the most among us to those with the least among us. Instead of opting for equality in poverty, we Americans have chosen greatness time and time and time again. In the modern day, the specific policy solutions may have changed slightly since our founding, but the overarching themes are the same as they were when America was born. The promise of America remains. I look out in the audience and I see the modern day keepers of this promise. Our nation is so lucky to have thought leaders like all of you in this room developing the cutting edge ideas that greatness demands in the 21st century. This movement, all of you, all of us, issues the clarion calls to the common man, rallying America around a shared conviction that all are indeed created equal, that all should have a chance at the American dream, and that America must always come first. It is cause for celebration that our conservative ideas are winning, as my boss likes to say. A government's first responsibility is indeed to its citizens, but for too long our leaders had neglected this fundamental truth. They cavorted around the globe, they signed international agreements that earned praise in the mainstream media that unfortunately often put Americans last. They stood idly by as their destructive policies decimated our middle class and divided our nation. They locked away a generation of African Americans under a regime of mass incarceration codified by one Bill Clinton. And they turned a blind eye to the opioid crisis that has hollowed out too many American communities. And instead of addressing the growing structural issues with our economy and our body politic, these elites just resolved to create more government programs. But what the most vulnerable among us needed was not a handout, but a hand up. In America, the proper role of government is to facilitate job creation and unleash the great American ingenuity that has so greatly improved our citizens' lives through the years. You all know this. If our government is going to play this role, allowing our nation to truly flourish, we must leverage the talents of every single American across this great land, from sea to shining sea, from the Space Coast of Florida to the Golden Coast of California, from the Williston Basin in North Dakota to the Permian Basin in West Texas. We face a fierce global competition that demands nothing less than America at her absolute best if we are going to continue to be the greatest superpower this world has ever seen. As you know, I have changed jobs a little bit unexpectedly about a year ago. I thought I would be here with you all sitting in the audience, my 16th year as the CEO of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, but I think God may have had other plans. Last year, I joined President Donald Trump in the White House, and part of his senior team running the Office of American Innovation, but truly working on the 5 or 6 biggest, most transformational issues that this country is needing and in need for. And as you probably know, Donald Trump has no patience for wasted potential. This refusal to accept the wasted American potential has truly been the North Star, the guiding star of this presidency, guiding our administration time and time again to policy victories that not only put America first, but that truly put Americans first. The triumph of conservative ideas means a better life for the single mom in Detroit struggling to make ends meet. The triumph of conservative ideas means that a family in Tampa, they just want a chance, or really a choice for their kids to have a great education. The triumph of conservative ideas means that. The triumph of conservative ideas means a better life for a new college graduate in Milwaukee who may just have a chance at a decent job and potentially pay down his student loan debt. The triumph of conservative ideas means a dad in Pittsburgh will have low-cost electricity so that he doesn't have to choose between eating and heating like so many of our friends in Europe. And the triumph of conservative ideas means that a sick child in Phoenix will have access to a doctor of her and her parents' choice for health care that she needs when she most needs it, at a time when she won't and her family will not be bankrupted. Our commitment to American greatness for all of our nation's citizens is particularly transformative for those with the least among us. And this is the story that we as conservatives have to continue to tell. Over the last 2.5 years, you all know some of these numbers, we've seen remarkable results. A booming economy that includes 5 million jobs created. Decades low unemployment numbers, African Americans, the lowest unemployment numbers on record, Hispanic Americans, the lowest unemployment numbers on record, Asian Americans, the lowest unemployment numbers on record, Americans with disabilities, the lowest unemployment numbers on record. It goes on and on and on. We have more jobs in America now than we have people to fill them. This is an extraordinary, stunning accomplishment that no one even thought possible just a couple of years ago. Tremendous regulatory relief. I love hearing Governor Ducey talk about this, and he truly is a leader. We have a lot of governors come through, and there's no one better than Doug Ducey, so what a gift to Arizona to have him. But the regulatory relief, I don't know if you all remember, but everyone kind of laughed at the idea that for every one new regulation, we were going to get rid of 2 new regulations. That was audacious and impossible, and you're crazy. And I think you probably all know this, but in 2017, for every 1 new regulation in Washington, D.C., 22 were kicked out the door. And in 2018, that number went down, but still, for every 1 new regulation, 12 were sent out the door to be no more. Energy freedom, after years of stifling regulation, this country has unleashed an energy revolution unlike anything the world has ever seen, replacing the crushing Clean Power Plan, leaving the Paris Climate Accord, building the Dakota Pipeline, opening up ANWR, and so much more. We are now exporting energy, i.e. freedom, to the rest of the world. Criminal justice reforms that will make America safer and reduce recidivism and afford a second chance to those Americans who have paid their debt to society is now in existence across the country, thanks to so much work here, and especially back in Texas where that all started. 2 brilliant originalist justices on our U.S. Supreme Court with over 100 lower court appointees, a strong push to secure our borders finally and regain control over who and what comes into our country, a move away from Obamacare into real healthcare freedom, and more coming on that very soon from the White House. The list goes on, and how proud we should all be for what is happening in this country, because it all started with the ideas generated in this movement by so many of you. We have seen these basic truths play out through the implementation of conservative ideas in the states, of course, including in my own home state of Texas, in Arizona, and so many great states led by you all in this room. Now, as we see victory after victory for our ideas at the national level, our country is becoming stronger and freer and wealthier and safer and greater. We want an America in which every city is a landmark. Not just the cities in the South or the cities in the red states, but every town is the kind of place that anyone would be proud to say that they're from. That is the true meaning of prosperity. We are winning for the American people, the latest chapter in the American story of the best ideas delivering the best results for this extraordinary country. When you look at what is happening in America now, with so many Americans being lifted up because our ideas are carrying the day, I want you all to realize again and again what a difference your ideas and your work and your toil and your relentlessness and your persistence, what that all has meant to this current moment in time. I believe it is truly the difference between the survival and the death of the American dream. We are in a battle for the soul of this country. Make no mistake about it. It is a righteous battle. That is why you're all here in Scottsdale. And it is really not that dissimilar from the Battle of 1776, or for the Texans in the audience, 1836. But we have the awesome privilege of living through this pivotal moment in American history. But we also bear the very solemn responsibility that comes along with this fact of fate. We must live up to the calling of our time and embrace our fellow citizens with the patriotic affection that has made us one nation under God. In closing, I want to say, and I love that Bridgett mentioned this, I don't talk about it that much, but talking about prosperity for all and understanding that it's these ideas that lift all to a better life, but especially those at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. I know what it's like to be one of those Americans wondering how your family was going to make it. I remember being a little girl in a little Texas town, population 1,000, when my mother gathered her 3 little girls for some hard news, letting us know that our dad wasn't going to be around as much anymore and that we were going to have to make it, the 4 of us, on our own. So my mother did something very Texan and very American. She started a small business. It was a little flower shop on the square with 1 stoplight in Glen Rose, Texas. And that flower shop, that small business, kept us together. It kept us in a home, and it kept us in school, and it kept us okay. I remember those days vividly. Every day coming home from school, working in the flower shop, helping my sweet mom, and studying with my books behind that counter. I learned that hard and good work, a refusal to quit, and a love of family and neighbors were the difference between poverty and prosperity. And is that not truly the American dream that we are today charged to defend? God bless freedom and free enterprise, and God bless this country. My story is not much different from that of so many others in this country, probably many of you, overcoming hardship to live out our destiny. Our country should afford people the opportunity to do that. We worked hard, we prayed, and we believed in the promise of a better future. I am so honored to be standing in front of you today in fulfillment of the great American dream. What a country this is. I urge you to keep battling for that promise, an America that works for the least among us. I urge you to keep battling for an America fit for big dreams. I urge you to keep battling for an America in which our minority fellow citizens flourish as never before. I urge you to keep battling for an America where forgotten communities rediscover hope for the first time. I urge you to keep battling where an America where a mom can gather her 3 small children, share hard and painful news, and nevertheless thrive. Thank you all for the gift of being here, and keep up the incredible work you are all doing. God bless you, and God bless this country. Thank you.